Right now, Trump is pressuring the Kremlin. 50 days for peace, or else Russia will plunge into the abyss. Putin is ready to bend to Xi in order to avoid catastrophe. The bunker dweller is furious. Trump is preparing to strike at what is most sacred to the Kremlin. This will destroy Russia. New secret nuclear bases. What is Putin preparing for? These details will surprise you. Russia's offensive is pure cannon fodder. The Russians are destroying their own finishing off the wounded, erasing the living. Fico is reaching into the EU's pocket, Moscow is in shock, and the Ukrainian armed forces now have a super weapon against drones. All this and more in our episode of Hotspot. Trump grabs Putin by the throat, an ultimatum to the Kremlin. 50 days or a sanctions bomb. Trump has switched to hardball mode, Putin is in shock. The US promises weapons to Ukraine. Who's footing the bill? Europe is exploding with criticism.
Harsh sanctions are being postponed again. Trump threatened the Kremlin with tariffs if a peace agreement isn't reached within 50 days.
I am disappointed in President Putin. I thought we would make a deal 2 months ago, but it never happened. We will impose very tough tariffs if we don't reach a deal within 50 days. The tariffs will be around 100%. You could call them secondary tariffs.
What Trump is doing, including his statements about 50 days, 60 days, can be called a style of managed escalation. After all, he behaves the same way in tariff policy. If price caps are imposed on Russian oil and sanctions against the Russian tanker fleet are strengthened, then that will matter.
The European Union has already responded to such a statement. Swedish Prime Minister Kristersson stated that they will continue rapid and substantial arms deliveries to Ukraine. And the head of European diplomacy, Kallas, expressed outrage, saying that 50 days is far too long.
On the one hand, it is very positive that President Trump is taking a firm stance toward Russia. On the other hand, 50 days is a very long time, especially when we see that they are killing innocent civilians every day. It is clear that we all need to increase pressure on Russia so that it too will want peace. And it is good that the Americans are taking such steps. And I hope that they will also provide military assistance as the Europeans are doing.
There were also positive statements. The US will sell weapons to Europe for further deliveries to Ukraine. According to unofficial data, the amount for the first wave of deliveries is about $10 billion.
We have accomplished a very important task. Military equipment worth billions of dollars will be purchased from the US and handed over to NATO, and it will be quickly delivered to Ukraine on the battlefield.
I see something positive in yesterday's statements from Trump, that Trump is putting pressure on Putin. And the main tool of pressure today, the most effective one, is supplying weapons to Ukraine. Yes, not for free. That's how it was predicted. Importantly, in addition to air defense systems, it is very likely that longer-range missiles will also be supplied, which can be used to strike Russian territory.
Trump also stated that Patriot missile systems and batteries will be in Ukraine within a few days.
There is one country that has 17 Patriot systems. They don't need them right now, and they are already being prepared for shipment. We are about to make a deal under which all 17, or most of them, will go to the war.
However, after a conversation with the US Secretary of Defense, Keggs denied the statement. German Defense Minister Pistorius stated that it will take at least a month for the deliveries to happen.
We cannot transfer another one of our systems, but we are ready to buy 2 from the US. Given the necessity that none of us can ignore that Ukraine needs more Patriots. But they will only be delivered in a month. Right now, we're talking about days, maybe weeks before a decision is made. But after that, it will happen very quickly.
Trump was quite eloquent in his statements about Putin and his constant lies, but supposedly the Russian dictator was not able to deceive him.
I always hang up the phone and say, that was a good conversation. And then they launch missiles at Kyiv or another city, and it's strange. And after that happens, after it happens 3 or 4 times, you start to think the conversation means nothing. I go home and tell the First Lady, today I spoke with Vladimir, and it was a great conversation. And she says, really? Another city has just been hit. He deceived many people. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden, but he didn't deceive me.
But Secretary General Natarute literally mocked how Russia, suffering huge losses, pretended to negotiate.
We put pressure on Ukraine to send a strong team to Istanbul, and they did. But the Russians came up with this historian describing the history of Russia since 1250. 100,000 Russian soldiers have died since January. 100,000 soldiers. So if anyone in Moscow is hearing this is what Putin is doing right now.
Putin assumed that the United States would not supply weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine would be weakened and lose the war. Trump is showing that this won't happen. That's why what's happening now contradicts the expectations and assumptions of the Kremlin. This disrupts their plans. It doesn't align with their interests. Another thing is, why do I claim that Putin won't make any compromises over these 50 days? Because that would be a sign of weakness.
Now, Putin will have to seriously consider whether he's ready to continue the war under conditions where Ukraine is receiving new weapons. Especially since even right now, he is losing his soldiers by the hundreds of thousands.
Made in Ukraine, a new bullet from the Ukrainian armed forces is changing everything on the front line. FPV drones beware. Ukraine created an interceptor bullet. The new weapon is already terrifying the occupiers. Watch the explosive details coming up in the broadcast.
In this war, unmanned technologies have radically changed the situation on the battlefield.
It's chess. They play, we play. War used to be very much like checkers, Soviet checkers, where everything was quite primitive. Now it's chess, with different categories and aspects.
The Ukrainian army has developed an entire strategy for destroying equipment and the enemy itself using FPV drones. But the occupying forces have once again stolen these ideas and are using FPVs for terror. According to Bilmir, this will not happen in the near future. Putin is allegedly preparing a new large-scale offensive by the end of the summer. But Ukrainian soldiers are capable of stopping the occupiers' offensive thanks to new anti-drone weapon capabilities. To counter FPV drones, new types of ammunition have appeared in the Ukrainian armed forces. In a significant development for its defense capabilities, Ukraine is now commencing the domestic production of highly specialized cartridges. These innovative munitions are uniquely designed to be effectively fired from standard, widely available assault rifles, offering a versatile and accessible solution. The Ukrainian company Brayon, a notable entity in the nation's defense industry, has taken the lead in this crucial manufacturing effort. They have successfully initiated the production of these advanced cartridges, which possess a remarkable capability. They are specifically engineered to neutralize and destroy unmanned aerial vehicles, commonly known as drones. This is achieved through a sophisticated design that essentially creates a devastating wide-area impact, akin to the powerful and dispersed effect of a shotgun blast, making them exceptionally effective against airborne threats. They are made in the most common assault rifle caliber 5.56 millimeters. After being fired, the cartridge breaks apart into about 5 fast-moving pellets. When fired rapidly, the spread of several pellets creates a shotgun-like pattern that can hit FPV drones at distances of up to 50 meters. The development has already been codified according to NATO standards. The goal is to provide every soldier with at least one magazine loaded with these rounds.
Stop!
They shot down the drone with a single shot.
These special rounds, informally called Ps, have already been used in limited quantities. One of the advantages of the Ps is that the initial velocity of its projectiles exceeds 800 meters per second. Compared to smoothbore weapons, it's twice as much.
Shotgun, it's unloaded. This is the most effective weapon against something like an FPV. So the shot spreads out, yes.
The rounds are compatible with NATO rifles used by the Ukrainian army. So the soldiers won't need to be rearmed or additionally equipped. Now, when a drone is spotted, you can simply switch magazines. There will be no need to carry separate weapons. Simply switching magazines takes much less time and coordination than changing weapons.
This fire needs to be aimed, not just fired in that direction. And at the same time, you have to track a moving, fairly small target. It's very difficult. But if you do everything right, your reward will be a downed drone.
Ammunition will come in handy in situations where there are large numbers of UAVs and small enemy assault groups on the battlefield. Over the past 3 years, unmanned aerial vehicles have radically changed the nature of combat in Ukraine. FPV drones, which are distinguished by their high speed and maneuverability, have caused the front in Ukraine to become frozen. They are capable of striking tanks, IFVs, armored personnel carriers, artillery positions, and command posts, and serve as a replacement for expensive munitions. More than 2/3 of tanks are destroyed specifically with the help of FPV drones. The production of FPV drones is so inexpensive that they can be called budget suicide terrorists. The emergence of such a seemingly small but significant piece of the puzzle like a special cartridge is especially important against the backdrop of the appearance of Russian fiber-optic drones, which are immune to electronic warfare jammers. Now developers face the task of scaling up production to supply as many Defense Forces units as possible with these new developments.
A blow to the sacred. Ukraine can wipe out St. Petersburg. Trump has given the green light. The US has all of the Russian Federation's secret nuclear bases in its crosshairs. A lightning raid, the elite of the Ukrainian armed forces broke through to the rear. The enemy's manpower has been reduced. See how exactly this happened? Coming up next.
They destroyed enemy personnel and captured a Russian army soldier as a prisoner. These are the results of the operation carried out by Special Operations Forces, which took place without any losses for the Ukrainians. Our country can strike the enemy not only directly on the front line. A Washington Post journalist citing sources reports that allegedly, in a conversation with Volodymyr Zelensky, US President Donald Trump noted that Ukraine should put more pressure on Putin, in particular through strikes on the capitals of Russia and St. Petersburg.
In any case, today we must say that President Trump's rhetoric toward the Russian Federation is indeed changing. We are saying that today the rhetoric of the President of the United States is aimed at strengthening Ukraine with samples of American weaponry.
The information source Military Watch reported that Trump is considering the possibility of supplying Ukraine with air-launched cruise missiles JASSM. According to Trump, these missiles are intended for the American F-16 fighter jets currently in service with the Ukrainian armed forces and are capable of striking targets deep behind the front lines on Russian territory. In its basic modification, the JASSM has a range of 370 kilometers, while the JASSM ER variant can reach 926 kilometers.
Today, Ukraine is also putting pressure on the Russian Federation, not through strikes on, say, the Kremlin. How important is this today? From an emotional and political standpoint, yes. But today, Ukraine is using a strategy of striking military-industrial facilities of the Russian Federation, which, from a military, economic, and political perspective, is absolutely the right strategy to choose. Therefore, to definitively say that any discussions regarding potential strikes on Moscow were held, I truly think that's more in the realm of pure speculation than it is the actual verifiable truth.
The Ukrainians strike at Russian military targets wherever they have the opportunity. For example, on the night of the 15th of July, the Lipetsk and Voronezh regions were targeted. In Voronezh, they reported shooting down a drone, and in the city of Yelets in the Lipetsk region, the Energia plant was hit once again. This plant specializes in the development and production of autonomous power sources for household, general industrial, and special equipment.
This enterprise is unique. It specializes in manufacturing power supply units and batteries for Iskander missiles. First of all, and secondly, this is the very enterprise that specializes in producing the very module that turns the well-known FABS aviation bombs into CABs, which Russia is now using to the fullest extent on the battlefield.
5 secret, or rather no longer secret, Russian bases have been discovered by American satellites. Images from Planet Labs taken in May and June 2025 confirm activity at facilities in Osipovichi, Belarus, Kaliningrad, Gajivo, near Norway and Finland, on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago, as well as at one base closer to Alaska.
In any case, they are supposed to play a kind of intimidating role for our partners, for Ukraine, for Europe, for the United States. As if to say, the nuclear potential of the Russian Federation, as of today, it hasn't gotten worse, it's becoming more powerful. Moreover, new bases are being built. I think this is a continuation of the topic, or an attempt to continue the topic of the so-called nuclear club. the club that the Russian Federation periodically, especially when things are going really badly for them, pulls out and tries to threaten the whole world with again.
There has also been increased activity recorded in temporarily occupied Mariupol. Local authorities report the delivery of ammunition via the railway station and port, as well as the expansion of the Mariupol-Melitopol highway.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
There will be no breakthrough. The Ukrainian armed forces have pinned down the occupiers on all fronts. The front is impenetrable. Everything is falling apart for Putin. Minus one locomotive, the Ukrainian armed forces are blowing up the enemy's logistics. Fake news on the air. Russia lies about victories, but in reality is burying battalions. Explosive details coming up in the report.
Hundreds of occupiers killed and hundreds more brought in from Russian reserves to replace them. The meat grinder on the Pokrovsk direction continues, remaining the hottest spot on the front for over a month now.
The enemy force that attacked Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022 consisted of 160,000 troops along a 1,500-kilometer front. Essentially, in here, on less than 100 kilometers of the front, the enemy has concentrated a force of over 100,000.
The Kremlin's main objective here is to break through our defensive line and split the front into two separate directions, Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. They don't care about losses, but since the 1st of July, the occupiers haven't advanced a single meter here.
As for Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka, it's clear that the enemy has broken through or is trying to break through more specifically into the bridgeheads near Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka in order to split them into two separate bridgeheads and first of all to outflank Pokrovsk. This will already be the third attempt to launch flanking attacks on Pokrovsk and accordingly to advance to try to move in the direction of Kostiantynivka. These are indeed the directions that are currently the most difficult, where the enemy is showing the greatest activity.
At the same time, attacking Kostiantynivka from the direction of Toretsk, the Russian forces even decided to use heavy armored vehicles, which is a rarity for them these days. Two tanks with infantry tried to gain a foothold, but they were met with a worthy resistance. As a result, the 28th Brigade reported the destruction of one of the tanks, the second tank was set on fire and disabled. The infantry was eliminated. After a period of relative calm, the Sumy direction has also become more active. According to reports from our State Border Guard Service, the enemy is actively trying to regain lost positions here and is attempting to launch an offensive on Sumy for the fourth time. By concentrating elite units, Russia still hopes to break through the front here, but according to command reports, they have not achieved any success. And this is due in no small part to the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces managed to hold their ground in the Kursk region.
This is a buffer zone. Today, of course, it has shrunk many times over, and now it consists of the commanding heights along the border. But what is the result? The result is that we have indeed managed and continue to manage to hold back those reserves that quite possibly could have ended up, say, on the Pokrovsk or Zaporizhzhia directions as early as yesterday. It is clear that the enemy is already losing momentum. The enemy is no longer keeping to the schedules that obviously they once had.
Zaporizhzhia is also becoming a more active direction for Russian attacks, according to the command. Russia has redeployed 2 regiments of its troops there at once, reports the 118th Brigade, which is holding the defense in this area. There is also evidence of the use of equipment and heavy artillery, which, however, is not yielding any results.
We are talking about Huliaipol, we are talking about the Orikiv direction. If we talk about the Huliaipol direction, for example, over the past day, the situation has not changed drastically. That is, there were no active enemy actions, which in turn indicates that indeed regrouping and rotation of personnel are taking place. The enemy is indeed trying to move its assault groups closer to the line of contact. Their numbers have not changed, 3 to 4 people. They are trying to move forward. Next comes an attempt to build up forces. Accordingly, when there is a build-up, the activity of both tube artillery as support and aviation also increases.
At the same time, as often happens, victory in the Russian media comes much faster than in reality, which often is never achieved at all. So all of Russia's successes remain only in Putin's reports and news stories.
We see that the enemy is trying to attack, and on top of that is once again accompanying all the Russians with loud cries of victory in the information space. It has been claimed in particular that the Russians have occupied the settlement of Lapkovo, which does not correspond to reality. The gray zone may be expanding in these locations, that's obvious, but there is no sign of the enemy consolidating their position there today.
But Ukraine's achievements are quite real. For example, in the Zaporizhia direction, the defense forces, after waiting for Russia to patch up the railway after recent strikes, decided not to abandon such a successful tactic and destroyed another Russian locomotive.
Another enemy train on the temporarily occupied territory of Zaporizhia region, as they say, was derailed. It was a freight train carrying fuel and lubricants, and in fact the Russians had just finished repairing this railway track after the previous strike. Well, now they'll have to fix their logistics again.
Experts from the New York Times try to analyze why Russia has intensified its actions along the entire front line. According to their data, Putin believes he can break through the Ukrainian line of defense within a couple of months and achieve victory this year.
This version itself seems logical and explains a lot. Why does Putin keep throwing so many people into the fight, ruining relations with Trump, not using this chance, sending more and more new troops into battle, living as if everything will end tomorrow? He truly believes that within a few days, well, months, he'll break through the front, and that an offensive will start somewhere. Where exactly? It seems to me that they don't even have a clear plan or understanding. They want to go for Sumy, they want to go for Kharkiv region, they want Kupiansk, they really want Donetsk region, and they really want Zaporizhia. Everywhere. But so far, there haven't been any real successes, so they're pushing everywhere like water pressing against the sides of a jar, looking for a crack to seep through wherever they find one. That's where they'll break through.
And with this kind of tactic, huge losses are inevitable. The Economist writes that the summer offensive of 2025 has already become the deadliest for Russia out of all stages of the war.
Do you know how much they valued the life of one Russian? That's actually quite a decent amount. 3,800 square meters of Ukrainian land. So they divided the number of those who died ingloriously by the amount of territory captured. And it turned out one Russian dies for 3,800 square meters of someone else's land.
As of today, Russian losses have already exceeded 1,030,000 people. Moscow remains silent. However, inside Russia, they claim they are preparing to accept 1 million labor migrants from India. Coincidence? I don't think so.
A meat grinder of their own making, a hellish order to wipe them out. In the Russian army, they're hunting their own. Meat assaults. Commanders are getting rid of inconvenient soldiers. Total madness. Russians are shooting at each other. War correspondents are in a panic. The losses are off the charts.
This is the Russian soldier Mark, and most likely he is no longer alive. Mark's military command is to blame for this. They deliberately sent him on a meat assault. They want to wipe me out. They send me, there's an order from above. There's a personnel chief with a call sign Tatarin in the 9th Brigade. He got a personal call from the local guy who asked what's the status on him. He replied, there's an order from above to wipe him out. That's it. I'm asking for this to be investigated. When I'm gone, this video will surface. If you're already watching this video, that means I'm no longer alive. Or they report me as missing in action. Despite a serious leg injury and a metal plate implanted in Mark's limb, he was transferred to an assault brigade and demoted. There was an order from above to wipe him out. Tomorrow they're taking me to the front line, and all the local guys here said that the order for you is a one-way ticket. No one is gonna pull you out. They'll wipe you out there. Even if you get wounded by the enemy, no one will come to get you out. The Russian soldier repeatedly appealed to every possible authority, including the military prosecutor's office and the investigative committee. He openly stated that they were trying to wipe him out. In response, he was told that reviewing his appeal would take up to 10 days. Russian servicemen have been killing their own since the first year of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Wiping out or the practice of extrajudicial punishment is used in many units of the Russian army. Threats to wipe out are not about direct murder, but about sending soldiers into meat grinder assaults from which few return. Goodwin and Ernest are the most well-known Russian soldiers who met the fate of being wiped out. Before their deaths, they published a video message in which they accused their commander, call sign Zloy, of drug trafficking.
They're dealing drugs, and of course, all the command gets a cut from at least the higher-ups, right? That's it. And since we don't participate in this in any way and actively oppose it, our main task right now is to survive, while their main task is to make sure we don't, because we have enough information on this topic about who, what, where, and how.
They were transferred from long-range reconnaissance to an assault unit and sent on a deliberately impossible mission where the servicemen were killed. The situation with sending dissenters to be zeroed out has become so widespread that even Russian war correspondents have started talking about it.
We have massive losses, we have meat grinder assaults, and people like Ernest and Goodwin are being sent en masse to be zeroed out. It's just that their story came to light. But how many more unknown groups like them have perished without even recording a video? And this is truly a problem, because they're offering absolutely insane amounts of money for contracts, but people still aren't signing up.
You can end up in a meat grinder assault because of alcohol, drugs, stealing from fellow soldiers, or if mobilized troops refuse to sign a contract. Almost every day, the media reports on the use of zeroing out to cover up crimes, corruption, violence, and the sale of humanitarian aid. A former Russian soldier from the 30th of September Arrayed Guards Motor Rifle Brigade says that any move against the commanders could end fatally.
The closer you are to the front line, the fewer rules there are and the more lawlessness prevails. For any major screw-up, you could be zeroed out. There are no laws there. When we were running through the Grove, there were two people with us. One of them was a drug addict, the other had just come from the hospital, his lung was punctured. They could barely run, lagging at the very end and slowing down the whole column. The escort stopped and ran at the back. As soon as we entered the city, I heard two shots behind us. Then the escort caught up with us and said that those two had gotten lost somewhere. I never saw them again.
Often comrades finish off the wounded. There are two scenarios here. The first is the threat of being zeroed out. If soldiers try to evacuate the wounded or dead from the battlefield, the commander threatens to shoot anyone who helps a wounded comrade. In the second case, they are ordered to finish off the wounded so they don't have to evacuate them. Commanders deliberately withhold orders to evacuate soldiers and instead drive them forward to certain death. They also get rid of their own for selfish reasons, in order to claim the compensation for the dead. Warrant Officer Alexander Polishchuk and accountant Natalia Sudareva from the 60th Motorized Rifle Brigade recruited single men for contract service, then persuaded them to marry women who were in on the scheme. As soon as the newlywed wives gained access to the soldiers' bank accounts, the men were eliminated. The women became widows 2 or 3 times a year. They split the money from signing bonuses and funeral payouts among themselves. Wiping someone out in the Russian army is a common practice either for profit, to get rid of dissenters, or simply to avoid leaving a severely wounded soldier alive so they won't have to pay disability benefits later. But despite the horror of a system that shows no mercy to its soldiers, the number of Russians willing to go to die in Ukraine has not decreased in the Russian army.
Fico is blackmailing Europe. Moscow is rejoicing. The EU is in shock. Sanctions don't apply to Putin's friends. Europe is on the verge of division. But money decides everything. How much does friendship against Russia cost? And why is there no unity in Europe? Stay tuned.
Slovak Prime Minister Fico is demanding compensation from the European Union in order to unblock the new package of sanctions against Russia.
We want to reach an agreement. Until then, we will not support either the 18th package of sanctions or any other. Until we have something concrete on the table, a proposal that is acceptable, why the hell should we pay more because of Ukraine? It's all because of Ukraine. I'm sorry there's a war going on there, but I didn't start this war.
Fico explains this by saying that Slovakia will suffer huge losses due to giving up Russian gas.
We have a contract with Gazprom until 2034. If we pass a legislative act to terminate it in the event that the European Union stops buying Russian gas, then Russia and Gazprom will have the legal right to sue Slovakia over the fulfillment of the contract because it is based on the take or pay principle and its value is 16 billion euros.
Such penalties imposed through the courts could be, if not catastrophic, then at least very politically painful for Fico himself. it would simply be a perfect opportunity for the opposition, which would criticize Fico's policy.
According to the Slovak Prime Minister, other European countries are putting strong pressure on him, particularly German Chancellor Merkel.
We are preparing package number 18 as part of the European Union's sanctions against Russia. Only one member state is missing one that would agree to this. I strongly urge Slovakia and its Prime Minister to stop resisting and clear the way for the adoption of the package.
But we see that now, at this very moment, when the issue becomes critical, for example, regarding transit restrictions or the 18 sanctions package, Brussels has enough arguments, primarily financial ones, of course, to keep, let's say, Fico's multi-vector approach from Slovakia under control.
In Europe, Fico is called a Putin agent because for some reason when it comes to the interests of the European Union, he very often takes the Kremlin side.
Russia indeed had very serious and legitimate security concerns to act in this particular way, especially since it had been consistently misled for a considerably long period of time regarding the significant expansion of NATO. The conflict could have been stopped soon after it began. The vast majority of European Union member states, with the exception of Slovakia and Hungary, supported the idea that the war in Ukraine should be used to politically and economically weaken Russia.
He, in fact, primarily and above all spoke about a peaceful settlement regarding Ukraine. That's exactly what he was, as they say, pushing for it and fully supporting it. So here, I don't really know what kind of complaints Europe or anyone else could have against him.
Everyone understands the security risks coming from the Russian Federation and Putin. Countries of Eastern Europe understand this, especially well after World War II. This is absolutely obvious, but situational political priorities become significantly more, let's say, more immediately relevant. They clearly and decisively outweigh any kind of overarching strategic vision or long-term planning.
For example, in winter, after Russian shelling, Fico threatened Ukraine with a blackout.
Who cares about some Slovakia, right, Mr. Zelensky? But when you need something so you don't freeze in winter, you shout at the top of your lungs. If necessary, we will stop supplying electricity, which is extremely important for Ukraine during outages.
And in May, he flew to Russia's victory-obsessed gathering at Putin's personal invitation.
We mutually agreed that the government, under your esteemed leadership, would diligently make concerted efforts to fully restore comprehensive bilateral cooperation between our respective nations. Essentially, that is your position. Of course, we support this, and for our part, we'll do everything we can in this direction. We have always maintained relations with Slovakia as a friendly state, acting on the principles of respect and consideration for each other's interests.
But according to experts, if Fico's financial interests are satisfied, he will be able to turn a blind eye to friendship with Russia for a while.
The European Union, of course, will lend a helping hand to Slovakia, will support Fico, both by replacing some of the energy resources that used to come from Russian transit and, let's say, by balancing the price. He will be quite satisfied, as I mentioned earlier, that Europe will indeed meet him halfway, specifically regarding his economic concerns, which could otherwise result in political instability for him and for Slovakia.
The only thing the Slovak Prime Minister should not forget is that when you put money above morality and common sense, it never ends well.
That's all for now. And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.